Welcome to NucleCast, the official podcast of the Anwar Deterrence Center. Each week, we bring you leading experts for a lively discussion on topics related to strategic nuclear deterrence. Our host is Dr. Adam Lowther, Director of Strategic Programs at the National Strategic Research Institute. The views of the hosts and the guests are their own.
Welcome back to another episode of NucleCast. Of course, I am your host, as with all previous 100+ episodes, with the exception of one, and that's me, Adam Lowther. And today we have a great guest in Mr. James Stemm, who is the curator at the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History, which is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if you've never been to Kirtland Air Force Base, which is right there in the middle of Albuquerque, the museum is right outside the gate. I used to, whenever I was at Kirtland, that was the gate I always avoided, because whenever the Sandians left, that was the gate that was the most backed up. It would take 20 minutes to get out of the gate. So, and that was always where the advocates of nuclear disarmament would stand outside the gate across from your museum and hold up the signs. So I know exactly where you're located. So
Great.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of NucleCast.
Well, I'm very pleased to be with you today.
So you've got sort of, the museum dedicated. Well, let me rephrase that. You've got the public museum dedicated to the topic of nuclear science, because at Kirtland, of course, there's the NWIM, which is a classified museum. So many of our listeners may or may not have been to both. But for those who are not inside the DoD and who are members of the general public who might be listening, your museum is the perfect museum for them to go to. Could you tell us a little bit about the museum and what it offers and what visitors can expect?
Sure, absolutely. As you said, we are the publicly accessible face of the nuclear weapons programs of the United States. But we don't focus solely on weapons. We also look at nuclear energy and nuclear medicine, and also the cultural impacts of the nuclear sciences on people. So essentially, probably about half of our museum is focused on the history of the development of nuclear weapons, from the Manhattan Project through the Cold War. So we have quite a few various types of bombs. We have aircraft, we have missiles, all that kind of stuff that you would expect to see. And then we also talk about different types of energy production reactors. We talk about reactors in ships. We talk about nuclear medicine, treatments for cancer, things like that. So basically, anything that has to do with the nuclear sciences, we try to represent it in some way.
Yeah. So for your exhibits, are there any? I think the last time I was probably at the museum was maybe 6 years ago. And so what is there for those who haven't been through the museum in a while, like me? Is there anything new exhibits, new information that I would come back and specifically see for the first time?
Well, we try to move things around a little bit. Most of our permanent exhibits, like the Manhattan Project exhibit and things like that, don't change very often. But we do add things to it. We just recently added, people have probably seen the red and green arming plugs from Little Boy. We just added a pair of those to that exhibit. We are currently planning some expansion in our Cold War exhibit to bring a few more things in there. We just rehabilitated an exhibit on the WIP, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant down in southern New Mexico. So we talk about how they store and are disposing of nuclear waste from the weapons programs. And, we also do regular traveling exhibits or temporary exhibits. We have one up right now that's going to run through the end of the year that is all about It's called At Play in the Atomic Age. It's all about toys and games and music that is related to nuclear topics and how those have impacted in that aspect.
So for visitors of the museum, how would you recommend that if they want to get the most out of it and they want to really learn a lot? For a lot of folks, nuclear is not something that they think about. So as they go through this museum, this might be one of their first or only experiences to try to understand nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, like nuclear medicine. Most people they may not necessarily associate nuclear with medicine. How do you think they should go through your museum, and what should they focus on, and where do they start, where do they end, how do they get through this to really understand and get a grasp of what is nuclear?
Well, I think the easiest place to start, right at the beginning of the museum, we have a section that talks about what radiation is, about what nuclear how do I want to say this? About the people who have who made major discoveries in the nuclear sciences, about how radiation works, what it comes from, how it affects people. That's the easiest place for people to start. After that, most people go through our section on the Manhattan Project and the Second World War. That's probably the most common way to go through, and then it follows through the history, and then people get into the sections on nuclear energy and nuclear waste disposal and the cultural impacts of nuclear energy. And I think that probably that's the most common way for people to go through it, and I think it's probably the way that people get the best experience of the museum.
Yeah, so if you were to, we always end up in the gift shop. That's sort of how any museum tour ends. And so if we get to the gift shop, is there one item that's like, you got to take this is the best item to get out and take home?
Oh.
And I always get refrigerator magnets for my daughter, because as I've traveled the world, refrigerator magnets were sort of small and easy to carry. But those are very popular. Yeah.
Other than our gift shop is basically the very common things you would expect to find: T-shirts, hats, refrigerator magnets. I think one of the things we have that's quite popular, there's an artist here in town who draws postcards specifically for us. He's done the art, and it's the B-29 that we have on display, or the replica of the Trinity site tower that we have on display. And so it's very directly connected to us. So there's a lot of stuff like that you're not going to find other places.
Now, for you as a curator, and this is, you spent your whole career as a curator, and you spent 2.5 decades at the Pima Air and Space Museum. So when you came to this museum, you left air and space, you come to nuclear, and you've been here a few years. What has been sort of the most interesting things that you've become, expert in, that you've learned? Because it's air and space and nuclear are not exactly the same. So what have you learned? No. So what's been really interesting? What, that you've said, this is what I didn't expect?
I think it's been the breadth of what we talk about here. As you said, you don't really think about nuclear medicine and that sort of stuff as a part of the nuclear story. I mean, obviously, radiation is used in treatment of cancer and so forth, but you don't really think about how that development of that technology comes directly from the Manhattan Project and the development of reactors and stuff for that. I think that's been one of the most interesting parts of it.
Yeah. And for you as a museum, I'm familiar, there's the Nuclear Testing Museum in Las Vegas. the labs have their museums. Do y'all sort of cooperate together, maybe share exhibits? Are y'all working on projects together? How does that collaboration, because you're always trying to build the story and grow the knowledge and understanding of what happened and who was doing it, and then you tell that story as a museum. So as you're trying to do that, who are you working with? Where are you getting your sources and information and material from? How does that whole process work?
Well, we do collaborate fairly closely with several of the other nuclear focused museums. The Bradbury Science Center up in Los Alamos in particular is one of our major partners. We loan each other artifacts. We answer questions for each other, because we all have access to different things depending on what has been given to us at different times, and what our particular focus is. So the lab museums are more focused on specifically what happened at that lab, at Oak Ridge or at Los Alamos or up at Hanford, whatever. Whereas we are much more of a generalist. We look at all of it, where they may be more strictly focused on one particular aspect of the story.
Yeah. And so when it comes to your artifacts and your materials, where are you getting them from? Where does your stuff come from? Your documents, all of the things that, that allow you to build your exhibits?
A lot of our stuff comes from individuals who are donating their personal papers, their artifacts from their time in the Air Force or the Navy or wherever they were connected to nuclear weapons or to the nuclear sciences in some way. The larger artifacts, things like the weapons, are government property, so we get we are the custodian of those for the Department of Energy. So we are the ones who take care of the public collections for the DOE. Aircraft, things like that, we have on loan from the Air Force Museum in Dayton or from the Navy Museum. So that's kind of, we have a two-tiered collection. One is the government collection, which is the things that we maintain on behalf of the government. And then the rest are things that just individuals have given us over the years. I mean, the museum's been here since 1969. And over that time, we've had hundreds and hundreds of people who have donated their papers, their photographs, their artifacts to help us tell the nuclear story.
Yeah, it's and so when it comes to, how you sustain yourself, is it primarily through ticket sales, through financial donations, through sponsorships,
For the most part, yeah. The museum is operated by a nonprofit organization, so we receive some government funding, but not a huge amount. So most of it is what people donate to us, or gate admissions and sales in the gift shop.
Yeah. So for you, as somebody who's been there a few years, relatively new, and you've been diving into this nuclear story, are there some stories that you've come across that are particularly interesting or meaningful that, perhaps, we've never heard of, we, the public, or even, guys like me who've spent, 20 plus years doing this? Is there some really interesting stories? Because as you go through people's papers and you're diving into this, there's got to be some stuff that guys like me are just like, I didn't know that.
A lot of our stories are the best ones are tied to specific artifacts. So we have things like, we have a license plate from a car that was in Nagasaki on the day that the bomb dropped. And the story behind that is it's recovered by an American serviceman after the U.S. comes into the Nagasaki area, and he eventually passes it on to a U.S. senator who keeps it for years and then passes it on to us. I mean, and this is just a small, very personal sort of thing that survived that event and bears witness to it. It's burned and bent and things like that. And it's a very personal sort of thing like that. We all, and it's some of the things are not really directly necessarily connected to nuclear weapons development or even to nuclear science development. Some of the things that are really interesting that we have are related to actually the anti-nuclear movement. So we have a number of artifacts from that movement that are very evocative and moving from that point of view. So we try to represent a wide variety of opinion. So we're not trying to be a cheerleader for the nuclear industry or anything. We want to present scientific and historical facts and let people make up their own minds. And so that sort of stuff, that's the sort of stuff that people don't really expect us to have. Also, the fact that we have a very large collection of toys and games that are related to nuclear topics. That's something that a lot of people do not expect to see in a place like this. They expect it's all going to be bombs and airplanes. And, this other stuff really, I think they're really surprised by it.
This episode of NucleCast is brought to you by the ANWA Deterrence Center, whose mission is to educate Americans about the nuclear enterprise and strategic deterrence. So is there for folks who may be interested, is there a regular, pizza and game night that you host? Is that like every Thursday night? And
I wish we could do something like that. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah,
it would be, be something you might get the turnout for. So,
yeah.
So if you think about sort of the visitors that you've had, have there been any visitors that have come through and, as they're looking at exhibits, they're like, hey, that's a picture of me, or, hey, I was there on that day. And then you sort of add to the story of what happened. Does that happen often?
It does happen occasionally. It's getting rarer, particularly for the earlier aspects of this. I mean, there are very few Manhattan Project people left. We do actually have one man who is associated with the museum who still comes in regularly. He just turned 101, but he worked in the Manhattan Project. And so he's our last actual Manhattan Project survivor. We do get people from a little later on. Every once in a while, we get someone who comes in and looks at, one of the airplanes we have out there and says, oh yeah, I flew that one. And then, sometimes we get stories from them about, well, what were you doing with that airplane? And, what kind of things did you do? And what was your job? And so we get that sort of stuff fairly regularly. But as time goes on, we get fewer and fewer of the pioneer people. And we're getting more people for whom, some people it was just their job. They didn't really, it was what they did. And that was it. It wasn't really a life-changing thing for a lot of them.
Yeah. And are you guys actively capturing the oral histories that you may be able to?
We did in 2019. We took over the websites and collections of the Atomic Heritage Foundation, which did a program called Voices of the Manhattan Project. They collected several hundred oral histories from people from Oppenheimer on down. That deal with the Manhattan Project time period. We are looking into a project to do something similar for the Cold War period. At this point, we're trying to work out funding for that program and how we're going to staff that. But that's something we are looking at. We're hoping to be able to do that in the future.
So as you think about the future and how you capture this nuclear history, do you have some big goals, big objectives, you're hoping to accomplish in the years ahead?
I think my main goal is to enhance what we show now by bringing more of the post Manhattan Project, the Cold War era, and into the future, bringing that more to into focus for our visitors. At the moment, our presentation of the Cold War is fairly limited, so we have weapons out there with a little sign next to them telling people what it is, but we don't have a whole lot of interpretation. That's one aspect that I would really like to enhance in the museum. The other one is that we'd like to look in a little more detail at the non-weapons nuclear topics. So in particular, energy development and that sort of stuff. So that's where our main focus is probably going to be in the near future.
Yeah. And so as you think about how you see the presentation of nuclear, I mean, with the Oppenheimer movie, I'm sure the number of folks coming through the museum has gone up. I would imagine it's generated more interest. What do you think as you've seen this sort of resurgence of interest? What is there a gap that needs to be filled?
I think a lot of the gap really is in the nuclear energy and in that aspect of the nuclear sciences. I think that's an area that no one is really presenting in a really systematic way. We do a little bit, but our exhibits are aging, unfortunately. They're getting to be 12, 15 years old. So they need updating. I want to look more at the future of nuclear energy and some of the new and really interesting technologies that are out there and are under development now.
For preservation
for preservation, there are a lot of these things that there are a lot of companies out there that are designing new reactors or looking at new technologies for nuclear reactors. They're really focused on what they're doing. They're not really trying to preserve this in a systematic way of saying, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, why we're doing it. So that's our job. So we're trying to reach out to those people to say, hey, what do you have? What can you give us information-wise or artifact-wise that can help us tell the story of what you're trying to do, and get that to people so that they can recognize that the nuclear sciences didn't end in 1945.
Yeah, that's a interesting point. I wonder, is for the business of preserving our nuclear history, for the museums that are out there for you, is it an easy task to be able to do this? Is keeping the doors open, is seeing people come through with interest, is that an easy task or is that a difficult task?
It is a difficult task. A lot of the information that we would love to present to people is classified. We can't tell them. And a lot of the questions people ask us, we have to say, we're not able to answer that question for you. But that's one of the biggest difficulties. The other difficulty is convincing people that this stuff is actually interesting to them, that it's not just the bombs, not just weapons and destruction and that sort of stuff, but we're really talking about a technology and science that is constructive as well as destructive.
Yeah, and I assume with that and I don't remember because it's been 6 years since I've been through, but I would imagine there's a discussion of atoms for peace and the aspirational goals of Eisenhower. And
sure, yeah, we do talk about atoms for peace a little bit. We have quite a few artifacts and things from the nuclear ship Savannah, the only commercial nuclear powered ship ever built in the United States. So we do talk about that, and that was a part of Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program. So a lot of that is stuff that we talk about, but not in great detail, unfortunately. And that's another aspect that I would like to see us try to promote a little bit more.
Now, do you, just out of curiosity, because I'm oftentimes on NucleCast, we'll interview folks from the nuclear power side who are talking about third and fourth generation reactors and about, putting reactors in space and all sorts of sort of new and interesting technologies. Do you have any of that technology? Some of the newer stuff that they're looking to replace these nuclear reactors that were built in the 60s and early 70s?
We have a little bit. We have a small exhibit about thorium molten salt reactors. We've been talking to a company here in Albuquerque called Kairos Power, who are working on small reactor development. So we have a few small things about it, but that's really an aspect that we have not been able to really bring into the museum at this point.
Well, we'll see what we can do to help. We've got some contacts.
I would love contacts, people who are willing to, help work with us to help present the future of nuclear energy.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do for you there. So at this point in the show, I like to bring out my genie. His name is Bob, and he grants 3 wishes to all of our guests, but they can only be related to the topics we've been discussing. So as I bring out Bob and rub the lamp, and he's here to grant you your 3 wishes, what would those 3 wishes be?
Let's see. More space, more money, and more stuff. That's the secret of museums. Lots of money, lots of space to display things, and lots of things to put out for people to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Okay. So wish number 1. Do you have
more money?
2 more money? Wish number 2.
Wish number 2. I would love to be able to get more material related to the post Manhattan Project era, the first 20 years of the atomic age. That's the time period where there's so much going on, and it's stuff that we don't have a whole lot of. We kind of have the 1940s, then we sort of have a little bit in the 50s, and a lot more in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So that mid 50s time period is an area where I would really love people to be bringing us more stuff.
Okay, so listeners, you've heard the request. If you've got some of that stuff, you know who to contact. You know where he is. He's looking for you to make a contribution to the museum. Okay, so you've got your second wish. One final wish?
My one final wish is, more space. We need a bigger building. We need more land to do this, to do what we do on. We have plans, but it's a long-term sort of thing. But that's the main thing, is being able to expand what we do and how much we can put out for people. And that gives us a better chance to tell a more complete and balanced stories.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, James Stemm. Thanks for joining us. It's good to talk about it. Hopefully, you'll see a few extra visitors.
Hopefully. Oppenheimer gave us a little bit of a boost, but we can always use more.
Well, thanks. James Stemm, curator at the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. Thanks for joining us on NucleCast.
It was my pleasure.
And thanks to you, the listeners, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode. We oftentimes don't necessarily think about museums, right? I mean, we sort of go through them but museums play really an important role in preserving our history and preserving, that not necessarily the technical knowledge, but just for the public, what happened and, what were the implications and who were the participants and what is that, that tangible stuff. And so talking to James Stemm was important because it was our opportunity to really get a sense of, here's this National Museum of Nuclear Science and History, and they're out there trying to preserve that stuff. And so we got a good sense of, what are they trying to do? How do they do it? What are the requirements? And so hopefully it will spur you to take part. He's looking for stuff from the early 50s, and they're always looking for stories and looking for ways to offer better interpretation of their exhibits. And that might mean you need to help. So hopefully you'll step in.
This has been a production of the ANWA Deterrence Center. Our executive producer is Kimberly Charrington, and this episode has been engineered and mixed by David Krumthal. Follow the show on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at NuclearCast. Listen, follow, and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.